It is really raining out there, huh? Gosh, I suppose it's a day to remember our baptisms or something. Yeah. Well, I wanted to share with you one of the most delightful parts of my job, and that is getting to know new members in this place, getting to hear stories about people who have found a real sense of home here at Peace Lutheran Church. So oftentimes when people join this church, they will say things like, "This place is just such a friendly place. I've felt a warm hand of welcome here, and I feel like this is a kind of family for me." I love hearing those stories. They warm my heart to hear about the ways that you all are welcoming new members into this community. But one of the most painful and frustrating parts of my job is hearing stories about people who don't find the same welcome here at Peace. Stories about people who have actually felt excluded in this place, people who are on the fringes and are really members only in name. It's difficult to hear those stories. And I wonder what the difference is between these two types of people. People who find a deep sense of family and community here, and people who are members only in name and who are on the fringes and feel excluded. The difference is hospitality. It's this word that we find right smack dab in the middle of our reading from Romans that our sixth graders just read. Hospitality. And when the author of Romans, Paul, writes about hospitality, he talks about hospitality as being something that is different than friendliness. Friendliness, if I want to find somebody who's friendly, I can go to my local grocery store and I can surely find a Hy-Vee employee with a smile on his face who's ready to help me find whatever I need to find. That's friendliness. But it's different than hospitality. That Hy-Vee employee probably doesn't really want to know a whole lot about me, about who I am or what makes me tick. He probably doesn't even want to know my name. Hospitality is something different than friendliness. It's something that is more radical than friendliness, and it's more radical because it's not always easy to be hospitable. It's not always our first instinct or impulse. We're wired to hang out with people who are like us, who look like us and talk like us and act like us. So we clump in these groups of people who are most similar to ourselves. But hospitality requires a hard work and an intentionality. It's not easy because it calls us to go out of our comfort zone and relate to people that we might not normally interact with. Hospitality requires a careful noticing of what's going on around us. So we're aware of people who are just sneaking out the back door before worship even ends. Or people who are hanging out on the fringes drinking coffee with no one to talk to after worship. One of the translations of the Bible that I read, a translation of Romans 12, talks about hospitality as being inventive. I love that word, inventive hospitality. It implies that there is something creative. There is a creative aspect to hospitality that's different than simply shaking someone's hand and giving a cordial smile. Hospitality means creatively thinking about questions that I can ask another person or things that I can say to another person that's going to draw something out of them, that's going to share their story or their deep passions or their deep fears with me. That's hospitality. I'd like to share two stories with you about hospitality in my own life. A time when I tried to extend hospitality and a time when hospitality was extended to me. First story. I was maybe a junior or senior at Augustana College, and it was lunchtime one day, and something that you need to know about the cafeteria at Augustana is that it's made up of kind of these long tables, and people tend to sit at tables in their friend groups. So there might be a group of really popular students over here, and kids that really like music over here, and kids that are kind of geeky or nerdy over here, and then athletes over here. So in that regard, it's a lot like a junior high or high school cafeteria. So it was lunch one day, and I decided on this day that I was going to eat with a group of people that were different than the group of people that I normally eat with, to kind of go out of my comfort zone and extend that hospitality. And so I decided that I was going to eat at the football players' table. Now, I'm not an athlete. I didn't even know any football players, really, when I was in college. They certainly did not know me. But I took my tray and bravely walked to the football players' table, and I sat my tray down, and I began to try to make conversation with these big, burly guys. It was perhaps one of the most awkward meals I have ever eaten in my life. It was a struggle to make conversation with them, to find things that we had in common. It felt awkward to me. But you know, at the end of that meal, I was really glad that I took the opportunity to step out of my comfort zone, to see people, talk to people that I didn't normally interact with. It did something to me. It opened me up and it changed me. Second story. I worked at camp for several summers. I worked at a camp in Minnesota. This was the camp that I grew up going to as a kid, so it was a place that felt really familiar to me. But after 3 summers of working there, I decided that I wanted to work at a different camp, again to get out of my comfort zone a little bit, and so I applied to work at a camp in Montana, a camp that I didn't know anything about, a place that I'd never been before. And I showed up on that first day to work, and I was getting settled in my bunk, and then they were giving first-year counselors some different chores to do, and I got stuck sweeping a room somewhere. And I remember sweeping and feeling so lonely, feeling like I didn't belong there, I didn't know anybody, I felt really out of place and really uncomfortable. And as I was sweeping, someone came up to me, another counselor, a guy who had worked there many summers previous. He knew all sorts of people. He could have been hanging out with his friends, but instead, he went out of his way to be intentional about coming to me and putting his arm around me and saying, "Anne, I want you to know that I am so glad that you are here. I know that this must be a difficult thing for you to come to this new place where you don't know anyone. But I'm so glad that you are here, and I am so excited for the unique gifts that you are going to bring to this place this summer." It made my day, and it made my whole summer to hear him say that. I tell you those 2 stories to illustrate 2 points. First of all, that hospitality is not easy. Sometimes it feels awkward because we do have to get out of our comfort zones a little bit. But hospitality is so important. It can make somebody's day, and it can change somebody's whole life. Here at Peace Lutheran Church, I think we do a pretty good job of hospitality. We're mindful of those people who need care, people who might be feeling sick, and we're quick to extend hospitality to those folks. But there are ways in which this congregation still has work to do in the area of hospitality. As long as there are still people on the fringes, people drinking coffee alone, people whose names are not even known, we have work to do on hospitality here. Sometimes I think all we need is a little bit of permission to practice hospitality. We need to carve out safe spaces in our community, in our church, where we can practice hospitality. I talk to a lot of people here at Peace who will say things like, "And I've been worshiping here for many years. I've been a member here for a long time, and week after week after week, I see the same people sitting in the pews next to me, and I know their faces, but I don't even know their name. And I've been a member here so long that I feel embarrassed to ask their name." I want to tell them I feel the same way. I've been a pastor here for a year, and I still only know a fraction of people's names. We need to create safe spaces where it's okay to ask one another our name, where it's okay to ask questions that are going to draw one another's stories out. Our world doesn't often give us that safe space. Our world tells us to clump up and group up according to people who are most like us. So I think today Instead of me standing up here and continuing to talk about hospitality, I think we're actually going to practice this for a while here. We're going to turn the sanctuary into a safe space to try out hospitality. So in just a minute, I'm going to invite you to get up from your seat, to walk across the sanctuary, or just to turn to somebody in the pew behind you and to introduce yourself to them. Maybe it's someone who you've seen week after week after week worshiping. You know their face, but you don't know their name. Ask them their name. Find something that you have in common, and maybe share a story about a time when you've experienced hospitality in your own life. I know this isn't going to be the most easy thing for some of you to do. It might feel awkward. But I can almost guarantee you it's not going to feel as awkward as my experience sitting at the football players' table. So we'll try this for a few minutes. You can get up out of your seats, and then I'll call us back together in just a little bit. Let's practice hospitality. We can come back together. It is so fun to see these conversations unfolding. We've got some folks learning sign language over here. That's awesome. Well, thank you for trying that. I know that it isn't easy. I know that sometimes it feels awkward, but I hope it was also a meaningful experience for you, that you met some people that you maybe wouldn't normally meet, maybe people whose faces you know, but you've never gotten to know their name until today. So thank you for doing that. My prayer is that this would become a safe space where we can practice hospitality, where we can give and receive hospitality. This is the reason why we do things like Rally Sunday Fun Day, which hopefully will still happen today with the rain. But we do these activities not just so people can have a fun thing to come to, though it is fun to come to Rally Sunday Fun Day, but we want to carve out spaces where we give one another permission to practice hospitality, to get to know people on a different level. God is the one that inspires this hospitality in us. God extends hospitality to us at this baptismal font and at this communion table. And so we respond to that gift by extending hospitality to one another. Thanks be to God for hospitality and for all of you, dear people, dear congregation. Amen.